Well, hello and welcome to all of our viewers around the world. I'm Fiona Lang-Sharp, IBCLC Director of Communications and MC here at Gold Learning. Welcome to everyone joining us here today. I'm joined here by Jenny Blyth, who's going to be speaking at our upcoming Labor and Delivery Symposium here on Gold Learning. You can actually head over to goldlearning.com right now and check out all the details of this up and coming symposium. I'm very excited, of course, that we have you here today, Jenny. Now, Jenny's going to be talking about, well, I was so fascinated when I first saw the title because I was like, what is that? What does it mean? I'm going to tell our folks right now what the title is: Hand Jiggling the Pelvis in Birth, Creating Space and Improving Labor Progress. Welcome to you, Jenny. It's so good to have you here today.
It's wonderful to be here. Thank you so much, Fiona, for inviting me to share a little bit of wisdom that I have gleaned over the many years that I've been working with birth.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, Jenny I have to say that, Jenny, you've been in the field for a long time. Am I allowed to say, like, I know it's in your bio, it's over 40 years that you've been supporting women and families in this area. And it seems to me, we were talking a little bit offline about how you sort of have really narrowed into a specific area. And I just thought that this is fascinating. What does this really mean? Jiggling the pelvis? Is it some, little fad or, I know, not to be crude or anything, Jenny, but, it comes to mind, like, how much more can we know or do? And of course, I am just blown away. Like, I start to listen to you and learn. The videos that you've provided for your presentation by far are just fascinating. Like, you can actually see sort of just that transformation of the client in front of you. And I think that, wow, this needs to happen to every birthing parent or every person. So tell me from the beginning, when did you start doing this jiggling, or when did it come about? And tell me about the other things that you do that kind of took you on this journey here.
Yeah, well, I'll try and keep the story as short as I can with the time that we have. But just to address that point that you made about, birth is just such a big field and we have so much incredible knowledge to draw on, and so many areas that could be specialized in. And, it's exciting when something new is discovered, or something very simple is discovered that seems really obvious once it's presented, but it was never in people's consciousness, not in our modern culture particularly,
right?
Up till the point that people were reminded of it. So I guess it is a bit of a dilemma for a lot of people. What are they going to narrow their field of expertise down to, I suppose? And there's so many things. Some people are just really amazing at the psychological aspect of birth, and other people are really, really very adept with research or whatever. And I really come from the empirical kind of practitioner aspect, I suppose. And back in about 1980, just after I'd given birth to my daughter and just after I was newly qualified as a massage therapist, I became really interested. And after my own experience of birth, really interested, and it was a great experience, by the way, really interested in all of the changes that take place in the body and how we receive that and how it feels. I used to go around saying to people, "Are you feeling this? Did you feel this in your pregnancy?" And people go, "No, I didn't feel that one, but I felt this one, or in your birth." And I got quite fascinated with ensuring that people in my community, which was a young community, and it wasn't an intentional community, but there were a lot of young people in the area that we moved to out in the country, and we were all connecting up and having babies and building homes. So I would offer my perspective, I suppose, and just ask them about what they were choosing, and did they realize it was this really big experience becoming a mother. And because a lot of us hadn't had, like it still happens today in the world, a lot of us hadn't had connection with birthing knowledge in particular, because our mothers, they might have given us some impression about their births, but they didn't really talk about it that much. Yeah, so that was my kind of segue into being invited to come and support women and families in birth. And in those days, we didn't really question whether that was okay to just do birth the way you wanted to do it and have who you wanted there. And over some time, I became aware of the law regarding that. But I was never setting out to pretend that I was, you know, a qualified midwife. I was just coming from that body worker perspective, and but very, very keen on studying and learning more about the body.
And you did.
Yeah, and I did. And it was fascinating to me. And by the 90s, I was very, very busy. It was just a word of mouth practice. And I was looking actually for ways to manage my energy, and also relationship dynamics that would come up, you know, in and around working with people having their babies. And I came upon a couple of really amazing teachers came my way, and I took those opportunities. And one of them, I was incredibly grateful for the experience of, because it was a somatic psychotherapy course that I immersed myself in that had a lot of really amazing guest teachers. And one of them was a woman called Kathy Kane, who is now very involved and with the somatic experiencing community. But she had started with orthobionomy, which is a modality that is grounded in osteopathy and was founded in the 1970s. Anyway, she took us through a little ilium balancing technique just out of interest to see how people would feel beyond that. And it just blew my mind. And it was just this way of working with the body that completely turned me around. And I just ran with it. I just knew it was really important, going to be a really important foundation for my practice. So I started working, you know, with this deeper understanding of how to facilitate and support self-corrective processes in the body and balance in the pelvis. And then intuitively, I just came to the jiggling, and I'll be telling that little story a bit more in my presentation.
Yes.
And I was so influenced by what I'd learned and how it integrated so well with my experience that I'd already had for 20 years or so. By the early 2000s, I was facilitating workshops on particular topics. And then by 2005, I'd actually written a book based on these things that I had learned that weren't really written about in mainstream or even any books on birth. And it was really just a downloading. It wasn't an ambitious attempt to be famous or have a bestseller. It was just I need to get this information down, because this is the stuff that's been really important for me and really helped me sustain my practice. And I started to share. I was sharing the bodywork information as homework for parents. So I kind of ended up distilling certain things I knew and would have sessions with each pregnant couple that I was working with. And then that was transposed into teaching workshops to care providers. So I worked one-on-one with parents, workshops for care providers. I still do that to this day. So that's really grown.
Fabulous.
Yeah, by the time I got to, and I wrote another book because I'd also created a bunch of handouts along the way that, you know, I was tired of photocopying. I'd photocopy them, and then, you know, friends would be at different antenatal sessions, and they'd go, "Oh, can I get one of those too for my friend?" And I just thought, I'm sick of this, so I'm going to just print this stuff up. But I'd already published the first book, so I felt like and it had been quite well received, so I thought I'd better make a good job of the second book. So that's when I wrote the Down to Earth Birth book, which is also a steady seller, because it just really directly addresses the birthing person in a way that kind of hopefully motivates their own self-care and their own self-responsibility and self-awareness, particularly body awareness about the process.
I love that.
And at about 2016, my friend Fiona, who teaches with me sometimes, and also has a very similar background. Like, we knew of each other and we were influenced by the same teachers.
Mm-hmm.
We met Gail Tully from Spinning Babies, and we dropped into each other's workshops at a conference here in Australia, and we just fell in love with each other because we knew that we were doing very similar work, but we had different techniques.
Yes.
And we were like, wow, your techniques are really weird, you know. And she's like, wow, your techniques are really weird. I would never have thought of that. But we just kind of nerded out on each other, and before we knew it, Fiona and I were invited to become trainers for Spinning Babies.
Amazing. And of course, Fiona Hallinan, who you're speaking of, is also spoken at Gold Learning, good friend of Gold. Yes. And we just love her here so much.
Yes, I love her too. She's amazing.
Such a wise woman as well, right?
Yes. Yeah. So we're, you know, for the last 15 years or so, Fiona and I have been teaching together, but also, you know, constantly sharing and developing information and experiences that we have. And we now run a mentorship program on the internal pelvic release work, because we also both have a long history of working intravaginally and have had that great privilege of being in attendance with lots of pregnant women who we're then in attendance with through their births and in attendance with postpartum. So to be able to see the changes and the integration into the body of the specific things that we teach for self-care and exploration and understanding. Yeah, it's been a fantastic journey.
What a beautiful journey. And you're such a lovely, eloquent storyteller, Jenny. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit about, you know, who you are and how, you know, really how you got here, you know, because a lot of us want to know, how did you get here? You know, what did you, you know, find along the way? And I know that there's more to this story, which of course we'll hear in your presentation, Hand Jiggling the Pelvis in Birth, Creating Space and Improving Labor Progress. I know for many of our participants out there, they're looking forward to hearing not only your presentation, but the entire symposium. You can head over to goldlearning.com right now and check out the dates and times for all the presentations. We have a live keynote, which is open access to everybody, of course, and we'll look forward to seeing you online there. Jenny, thank you so much for taking the time to sit with me today and share a little bit about your story. And we'll look forward to hearing all about more of what you do, of course, during your presentation. Thank you so much for joining me here today.
Can I just say one more thing?
Yes.
That I've also created a little booklet called A Little Booklet of Pelvic Jiggling.
There it is.
Which has all of the little considerations and kind of a framework around jiggling that I've gleaned, because I've been jiggling for a long time in that context.
Yeah.
So it's also available on my website as a PDF download.
Perfect.
Or as hard copy. And it's just, yeah, got all of what I think are the most important points enshrined in that.
Well, that's fantastic. That'll certainly set the stage for many folks who are looking for more information. So thank you again. Yeah.
Thanks
thank you
so
to
much,
Jenny.
Fiona.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks to everyone listening in once again. Don't forget to join us for the presentation on our Gold Labor and Delivery Symposium. Bye-bye for now, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.